Thank you very much, friends. What a luxury to be here on the Gold Coast this morning. I believe the sun will be out shortly. Welcome to the most exciting time in the history of the world. The evolution that's starting and has started in the last 24 months needs to be seen to be believed. More exciting than the discovery of fire, more exciting than the discovery of electricity. I was going to use Tesla or Edison here for the photo, but I thought if we go back to Zeus, it's less controversial and more exciting than the history of the internet. This is Tim Berners-Lee, who gave us the World Wide Web. All three of those images that you just saw were generated by artificial intelligence in a matter of seconds just by typing in those prompts. So for example, typing in discovery of fire gave us that brand new image, had never been seen before, and we'll explain how that has been made possible, again, just in the last 2 years. I was also dressed by artificial intelligence this morning. I asked GPT-3, which is one of the only buzzwords you'll need to take away from today, from the company called OpenAI, founded by Elon Musk and a few others. I asked GPT-3, what should I wear? And I had it act essentially as a fashion consultant. And it told me, as you'll see on the screen, that a white shirt could be okay, that a navy blue blazer might be okay. I was a bit concerned about wearing jeans, but you'll see in a moment that it also gave me permission to do that. You'll notice the model is very, very fast. Last night I said it types 31,000 words per minute. I didn't have my notes on me. It actually types 3.1 million words per minute and is doing so right now for organizations around the world. There are about 1 million users, and this has been implemented by Microsoft. But we'll talk about this in a moment. A bit of my background, I actually tried to design a chatbot when I was about 8 or 9 years old using Microsoft QBasic. This is in the very early 90s. It didn't go very well because I was trying to hand code basically every piece of factual evidence that I could find. What color is the sky? Blue. And then have the chatbot respond to me. That would take a very, very long time. But we also tried to do that for a number of years after. We're going to look at why that's been circumvented, why we've gone around that, and how we've found a different way of doing things. So I jumped into computer science after this. I played around as a sound designer for a long time. I was the acting head of sound at the Opera House for a while. Got to work with some very big names, applying computer science essentially in speaker design, microphone design, and making sure that the audience essentially could hear what was going on. Fascinating field, still applicable today. And I have been acting or working as a coach from about 2012 till about 2019, specialising in prodigies, specialising in high intelligence. I got to 2019, was invited to speak at a conference in 2020 and thought, maybe intelligence is not going to be that important, given that what we're seeing right now is essentially going to bring everyone up to the level of prodigies. So that's been my focus, that's been my passion for at least the last 2 years. I got to work with big companies like GE. I spent some time speaking with the prodigies through Mensa. It was a really interesting look at the combination of human intelligence and how artificial intelligence is lifting all of us up. My focus these days is on the human element of artificial intelligence. There are a lot of fantastic scientists out there, but we really need to involve everyone in the conversation about AI. For example, ethicists, lawyers, economists, every field, every industry needs to have input. This is not a computer science field anymore. Here's a slide that we could probably spend the next 45 minutes staring at, and like David said, might terrify us. If we assume that the internet gave us $13 trillion in value, in enterprise value, in just 24 years, artificial intelligence is set to bring us $87 trillion of enterprise value creation just in the next 9 years. This data is via McKinsey, using some stats from the US Labour Board, and it's been poured over by ARK Investment, you will have heard of, ARK. And I think it's very much telling about just how big this revolution is and is going to continue to be over the next few years. So a 6x compared to the internet on what is possible through both technology and humanity. There's another slide we could stare at for a while. I spoke with Professor Nick last night about the fact that we're not really looking at replacing humans. In fact, the amplification of what is possible is more interesting to me. Third row from the bottom there, in the legal industry, paralegals may be able to be amplified by about 4x using platforms like Actium AI and what you'll see later from Nate McDonald. Some of them are a bit more difficult to measure. For example, in the US, you can walk into a Whole Foods, fill your basket or your trolley and walk out. Through a combination of RFID and cameras, Amazon using Go and perhaps using One for hand printing to pay via your palm, knows who you are, knows what you put in your trolley, and you're done. So how many cashiers are we replacing in that scenario? It's going to be a bit difficult to measure. Some of these you may have seen in the media very recently, graphic designers being amplified. You might have seen the piece of artwork that won the county fair in Colorado, generated by AI in a couple of seconds. And it's writing books that also seem to be controversial in terms of how it's able to do that. Again, speaking with Professor Nick about what that may look like for universities. Let's have a quick look at the timeline. AI started through Professor Alan Turing back in the late 1940s. He gave a conversation or a presentation in London and then wrote the paper that contained the Turing test, releasing that in the early 1950s. Then there's been essentially an AI winter almost since then. There have not been many things happening. There's been a couple of milestones. You might remember the Eliza chatbot, which essentially rewords what you've said and then spits it back to you. That's been with us since the 1960s and is available still on all macOS machines. Deep Blue, beating Gary Kasparov in chess in 97. I very much remember that time in 2011 when IBM's Jeopardy AI beat Brad and Ken. IBM's Watson AI beat Brad and Ken on Jeopardy. That's still top of mind for me. And I do have a video of the latest AI going to beat IBM Watson as well. But that's one of the milestones that happened in the last, say, 50, 60 years. AlphaGo you may have heard of, which was using Go, which is a more complex version of chess, in 2015 was another milestone where AI was essentially thinking to the extent where it could go and play competitive games and solve problems, which was not possible before. But I want to talk about what happened in 2017 and 2018, almost by accident. Was in a Google research lab, and they had sat down to try and solve translation. If you've used translation via Google Translate, you will have used an older version of that. They wanted to basically sit down and look at converting between gendered languages, like English to French or English to German, where you need to know what comes before that noun so you can give it a male or female identifier. In so doing, they found that if they paid attention to different words in that sentence, they had a better idea of what was going on. They called this architecture the transformer, which is the second buzzword that I'll mention today, and essentially allows us to do some really, really crazy things. Have a look at this sentence. I arrived at the bank after crossing the blank. If you said street or road, you'd be correct. But have a look at how that sentence changes if we make that into river. A lot of the words in that sentence change. The word bank changes, crossing changes. Here's a more complex example. The animal didn't cross the street because it was too tired. Using Google Transformer and its attention mechanism, when we pay attention to different words in that sentence, we can ascertain what the word it means. This is as deep as we're going to go in the technology field. And the slightly different version, the animal did cross the street because it was too wide. In the first case, it refers to the animal. In the second case, it refers to the street. This discovery has enabled us to do some beyond incredible things. I don't actually have a word for it. It seems really simple. In fact, it's very similar to your iPhone in how it predicts text. You may have tried to write a message before, and it will guess the word that's able to come next. This is what Transformer is capable of, is a very, very good statistical guesser. Once they discovered the Transformer in 2017, a professor actually from Queensland, Professor Jeremy Howard, thought, what if we feed this Transformer with as much data as we can find? What if we give it some Wikipedia, some really nice web data, a few million books, news articles? What would happen? And so that has been the focus for these models for the last 24 to 36 months, starting in 2020. We're feeding it with horrendous amounts of data, 10.5 terabytes of data in the case of the largest model, the equivalent of several libraries. We're going to have a look very briefly here at the Roberta model in the middle there, or on the left there. It contains, the blue part there is some web crawls, what we call common crawl. Reddit, we're going to be using some popular internet. We're going to find some websites via Reddit, and because it's upvoted, we're going to say that's good data to go and grab. Some stories, some Wikipedia, and a whole bunch of books. Once we've allowed the model to grab that data and parse it, sit there and crunch it for the equivalent of 200 years, we get some really, really strange results. Here's an example. This is Roberta. You can go and use this for free. It's one of the 70,000 models that are available for free at Hugging Face. If I add this sentence here, the most beautiful beaches in the world are on Masks, Gold Coast. The model gives us what it thinks is statistically the most likely output there. So Australia's Gold Coast, Queensland's Gold Coast. I have no idea what Melbourne's doing there, but California belongs there as well. And it's chosen Australia for this particular sentence. The most beautiful beaches in the world are on Australia's Gold Coast. That's a bit of a fact. Let's try something a bit more subjective. The law professors at Bonn University are the most masked in the world, and the Transformer model here has filled us out with a few likely completions. The most respected, the most prestigious, the most famous, the most expensive. Nick? You'll notice, like everything that comes out of a Transformer model, it's completely unique. It has not gone to find a particular sentence that exists and then complete it. It's looking at each word one by one and predicting what is possible after that. So if I put that sentence before the word mask there, the law professors at Bonn University are the most, into Google search, which we used as its training data, that sentence doesn't exist. So the model has had to ascertain or derive what's going on within those words to predict what comes next. And you can get really complex with this. Here's a chat I had with an AI that I call Lisa AI, about a few different topics. And this was the very first conversation I had with it, I won't say her, and it really hurt my brain. Name 5 types of blue. It was not trained to answer 5 types of blue, but using prediction, it can go and tell you what that sentence means and respond to it. There's a couple of Google questions in there as well. Google interview questions. Why are sewer covers round? And 2 different responses for that. And then a bit of a riddle down the bottom. If the sky is the sea, what does that make birds? Lita can do riddles and songs, write books, write stories, and in one case answer questions, again, that don't exist with answers that hadn't existed before. This was one that, again, kind of hurt my brain a little. I asked, what's the relationship between intelligence and communication? Just to see what the AI would come up with, just to see what answer was possible. And Lita, via GPT-3, responded with, intelligence is about understanding the world. Communication is about being understood by the world. This phrase, this sentence, had not existed before the AI spat that out. We're already about halfway through, and I like to keep things interactive, so I'll invite you in a moment to play with me. Before the pandemic, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. One of the AI labs decided to go and find 27 years worth of her judgments, opinions, writings, interviews, interview transcripts, chapters. They collected a whole lot of data from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and they fine-tuned a particular model that's larger than GPT-3 on her content. This is a little bit of a toy. I wouldn't be saying that this is going to give you legal judgments, but I love the fact that it's interactive, and I also love the fact that we have access to a version of Ruth Bader Ginsburg after she's left us. So if you'd like to join with me, you're welcome. I'm going to give an example anyway. You're welcome to scan the QR code here or just type the URI into the browser. This is the model available for free where you can ask Ruth Bader Ginsburg yes or no questions, usually with a legal context because that's her specialty, and get a response. Once again, this is not deterministic. I wouldn't be using this in a court case, but just to give you an example of the practical applications of artificial intelligence and just by way of a case study. And I'll jump through one example here. So I'm going to ask-rbg.ai, and I'm going to give her a question about a topic that happened after she'd passed away. And using the transformer model, it's going to join some concepts together from my question and provide an answer that really shouldn't be possible, but with the technology and with the capacity of artificial intelligence, make this extremely compelling practical example and demonstration possible. So these need to be in the format of yes-no questions. She's not going to give a conversation or anything like that. It's essentially emulating a judgment on a particular question. I'm going to start by asking about ethics in this question, then we'll ask the legal example. Was it ethical for former Prime Minister Scott Morrison to secretly appoint himself to 5 ministries during the pandemic emergency? You'll notice the model is very, very fast. It takes that sentence and processes it within moments, and using her 27 years of opinions gives us a question. In this case, her verdict, or the AI's verdict, was no, and we get a little summary on what it found essentially through the training data to come out with this particular response. If your brain's hurting, you're welcome to run screaming out of the room. We'll do a slight tweak on this question as well. So we're asking about ethics here, but I wanted to ask a separate question using the word legal in place of ethical. Notice that you get slightly different responses every time as well. The model is statistical, it's creative in its responses as well, so these are not set in stone like our earlier chatbots. Slight change to the question here. Was it legal for former Prime Minister Scott Morrison to secretly appoint himself to 5 ministries during the pandemic emergency? There's no pre-programming here happening. Once again, this model was trained for the equivalent of 200 years on a lot of data plus the RBG data. And the verdict here for the question of legality, slightly similar with a reference to the Westminster system. We've looked at language, but anything that can be expressed in language, including symbols and tokens, can be predicted by these transformer models. That includes images, which you saw at the top of this presentation, but it also includes video. It also includes music, because we can symbolize music in different ways. Here's an entire multi-track music piece generated by artificial intelligence. By feeding it with the first 4 or 5 seconds, it comes up with the next 20 seconds in this example. Full multi-track score with a bit of a prompt for it to get started, and away it goes. So not just language, music, video, and images, but game button pushes. That's why it's able to beat a whole raft of Nintendo and Sega games. And then, as Nate will speak to in a moment, robotics, including physical embodiment of robotics. In this example, I'm going to feed it some language, some directions, and the robot is going to follow it. This is by Google. The instructions up the top right in the blue bubble, and the robot is using both a camera to translate vision as well as following the instructions there in plain language. This is everything I'm showing today is very, very cutting edge. This is in the last 2 or 3 months. I think this was about June 2022. So this robot is backed by GPT-3, and it's able to use a vision transformer to look at what's going on, to basically take some patches and translate what it sees, and then follow the natural language instructions. Think about how this might look with robotic assistants in the next few months, 12, 24, 36 months. The GPT-3 model and other models are already measurably smarter than humans in a raft of different measurements. As you know, I spent a long time in intelligence research, and for particular metrics, it's beating us. So in SAT analogy questions from the United States exam assessments, it's beating significantly human performance. And in trivia, it's also about 10% above what humans are capable of. It's already catching up to us in common sense reasoning and comprehension as well. Keep in mind the GPT-3 model is 2.5 years old. So if we look at some of the newer models, we've got models like Google Palm, which are above the human baseline in what it's able to do. I've brought along 3 books here for interest. I'm going to leave them on the stage. If you'd like to have a look at them during the breaks, please do. There's a non-fiction book here called Pharmaco AI on the left by Kenrick Gallardo McDowell from Google, the head of design at Google. who co-wrote this book with GPT-3, talking about philosophy. There is Magic's a Hoot by the pen name Leanne Leeds, a fiction book, again written, co-authored with GPT-3. She reckons this saved her a significant amount of time. It wrote the first 3,500 words in a matter of seconds, using her characterization, her plot, spat out book 3 in the series. And this one's kind of fun. This is GPT-3 wrote it, and then a model similar to GPT-3 illustrated it. So feel free to come and have a look at those 3 books as an example of what's possible and what's being done already with some of these massive models. And these models are massive. They're being used by corporations around the world. Here's some examples of corporations that are implementing it. I believe, and from my experience, I believe that all of the Fortune 500 companies have at least prototyped these models internally. Many of them are also using them externally. If you've tried Grammarly, you're using Transformer model. If you've ever typed a search into Google or Bing, as of 2019, 2020, both of those platforms are backed by Transformer models. Microsoft was so enamored with this concept of Transformers, they invested $1 billion into OpenAI, the GPT-3 company, allowing it to train the next big model, which will be coming soon. And people saw what was possible with these models and they chased it. It's almost like the new space race or a new gold rush. Here's a bunch of models that came out in 2021. I tried to keep track of what's been going on in 2022, but there's been a model every 3 or 4 days, so it actually doesn't fit on a calendar layout. They've been coming from everywhere. You see South Korea on there, China's been doing really well, the US and Canada is on there, Switzerland should be on there. It's been really interesting to see the kinds of organizations, some of them government-sponsored, that have been looking at implementing Transformer models. And they're around the world, like I mentioned last night, they're around the world kind of except for Australia. Australia had some input into the Bloom model, which was trained and finished in July and August. 1,000 professors were involved in that training, including some of my colleagues from Perth. Again, not just computer scientists. We brought in ethicists, we brought in economists, we brought in linguists who had their specialties in particular areas. But you'll notice that there's some different regions in there. You've got the UAE who've brought in a model at the government level, as well as all of the models that are coming out of the US. So I look forward to Australia catching up, but at the moment we have no models out of here. Here's a quick view of the major models in the last couple of years, starting with BERT, which was the very first model to come out after they had uncovered this transformer concept. And then GPT-3 in red there that you just saw seems to be the most popular model at the moment. If you've been following the media at all, you will have seen the Google Lambda model, which caused some controversy when one of the mentally ill engineers thought that it was sentient, and was picked up around the world through newspapers and news. More recently, we've got a bunch of open source models. So for some reason in this particular field, these labs love sharing with each other, and there's some excellent collaboration and communication between AI labs in whatever country they are in. I think a few people go back to 2001 with me. If you recall Windows XP, this is the wallpaper that I remember staring at in the very early days of consulting. It was called Bliss, this wallpaper. And the photo was taken in Sonoma County in California. Microsoft came up with their own transformer model very recently that they called Nuwa Infinity, N-U-W-A. They called it that because it had the capacity to generate images infinitely. Very, very, very long images. In this example, we're going to extend the Bliss wallpaper to nearly 28,000 pixels wide just by giving the model this prompt. Here is the original Bliss wallpaper. and it steps through and generates what it thinks should come next. All using the original concept that we talked about with Transformer. Every peak, valley, grass blade, cloud you're seeing does not exist. Every pixel has been chosen by the Transformer as most likely to come next. And this is a very, very wide image. It takes about a minute to come across the screen. It keeps going. If you're wondering about the application for this, they've already been using this for generating business logos in a matter of seconds. And the next big thing, of course, will be movie generations, using your own characters, your own plot, your own genre in a matter of moments. You could almost use that as a brand new wallpaper, just out of nowhere. And again, generated in just a few seconds. The fact that that has not been taken from anywhere, that's not been copied, that's not been photoshopped, but that every pixel has been selected by a very, very good statistical guesser is very confronting. I'm sure there's a better word for that. How many people here have been to Paris to see the Mona Lisa? Fantastic. I have not. I believe it's very small. What if we wanted to extend the entire canvas of the Mona Lisa? So here we'll take Leonardo da Vinci's work from the 1500s. We'll feed it to one of the most famous models available, again via OpenAI. This model's called dall-e 2. And we will essentially ask it to draw what should come around that particular picture. So not only can we generate things from scratch, like new logos, eventually presentations and charts, but can we actually build out via creativity, via intelligence, what should come after this very small piece. And this is what it comes up with. We've given it the prompt Mona Lisa uncropped, very recent, July 2022. And it's extended this piece to a point that I think looks quite realistic, looks quite possible, just based on that input image. My main focus these days is just ensuring that this stuff is visible. The media are doing an okay job. You will have noticed some articles, some of them just scaremongering or fearmongering, but you've got magazines like The Economist and Cosmo generating their covers via AI. More and more, some of these online outlets are generating their header image for the article via AI, and it's generally being applied in a way that can be used across industries. Very, very recently, the guy who came up with Transformer has left Google and formed his own company, Adept AI. And just this month, in September, has showcased using Transformer to drive a computer in the browser, in an application. Here's an example that I'll speak over. We're in Google Sheets right now. Adept AI there with the prompt down the bottom is allowing us to drive this Google Sheet by giving it plain English instructions. Creating tabs, figuring out where equations should go, figuring out what each column is. None of it pre-programmed. All of it, like we saw at the beginning, statistically guessing what is the most likely response. I think a little later today, I will be jumping through some examples in risk and compliance, but I wanted to give some examples in legal as well. I don't have a legal background as such, but I spent a long time in contract negotiation and drawing up and plowing through these very, very long contracts, all of them in legalese for some of the big Fortune 500s. And there are platforms today that can go and get you boilerplate and fill that in for you. The transformer model allows you to create new clauses and translate between them with ease, so they don't have to be pre-existing, and you can tell it to find the best of and then consolidate them together. Here's an example where in the GPT-3 playground, everything you see is my text. Until you see it highlighted green, it's just my text. I'm giving it some examples, which is something that we do in prompting or priming these models, is that we give it examples so it knows what it's doing. I'm giving it some examples of moving between legal clauses and plain English because I want it to explain to me what the hell moral rights are. And that was something that tripped me up a few years ago. So I'm going to give it a clause down the bottom in proper contract language and then ask it to translate that to plain English for me. So here's a legal clause about moral rights. It's so big I have to scroll it off the screen. Taken from a contract. And I'm going to say, put that in plain English and translate that for me. I suppose the last sentence there is most important. Moral rights include the right to be credited as the author, the right to object to changes being made, and the right to control when a work is published. There are a lot of settings that you can play around with here to make this more deterministic. And of course, I'm just playing here, so we may not be 1000% correct. Let's try something a little bit simpler in terms of the prompt. Let's ask it to translate from plain English into what might be useful for a contract. I've got the temperature set here, you'll see on the right, at 0.8, which means it's trying to be quite creative. It's not going to go and find boilerplate. So I'm asking it, our contract is for 1 year, but the NDA is forever. And then convert this, I'm giving it instructions, convert this into formal legal language ready for insertion into a contract. And you'll see the green highlight has been written from scratch, does not exist, but of course will have little snippets that are formal as an example to pick up and have a play with. Completely generated from scratch. Let's do a slightly different example here. I signed an agreement recently for a keynote in Europe, and they had this excellent clause that said they could record me, but they wouldn't say anything bad about me. So I'm going to try this here as well. You can record me and use my video as long as you don't say bad stuff about me. And there is a particular interpretation there given by the model in formal legal language. You can even ask it seemingly impossible things or very, very creative things. If a flying saucer lands at Bond University during Actium AI's conference, no space between Actium and AI, then it must be classed as an act of God, and all contracts are void. Let's give this one a go. Convert the plain English above into formal legal language. And you'll recognize there the act of God clause, essentially. And it's found that conference may relate to performance. Fantastic. We've come full circle all the way back to the practical demonstration and examples of what artificial intelligence today can do and has only been made possible since 2017, 2018, and has only been popularized and available to the general public since 2020, and how that impacts things beyond language. So it's not just that it can write an academic paper, and academic papers have been published at various levels via this artificial intelligence. It's not just that it can write fiction and non-fiction books or compose multi-track film scores and different types of music. It's not just that it can use natural language to help a robot get around the kitchen or get around the roads. It's also that it's finding its way into every field, from law to business to voiceover artists and beyond. The fact that you're able to see here today this bleeding edge possibility and sit on the verge of what might be an $87 trillion enterprise value revolution, according to ARC and according to McKinsey's data, puts you at the forefront of what's happening right now. I'm really excited to see where this goes next. I'm spending time with the chatbot and dialogue models that are available right now, having conversations with very fine-tuned versions of chatbots that have been implemented in therapy roles and medical roles with proper safeguards in place. Absolutely spending time consulting on how we can use this for documentation and beyond in the enterprise. And the image part I'm not too interested in, but how we can expand the use of language to uplift intelligence as a whole. So this concept of integrated intelligence, integrated AI, and effectively augmenting or amplifying what we're capable of doing with our biological brains by essentially hooking up to this artificial intelligence to help us navigate the world, to help us amplify what we're already doing and allow us to have a more flexible and creative lifestyle. Fantastic. Here's my contact details. I've got a monthly email that's quite popular called The Memo down the bottom there. Not designed for scientists, designed for anyone to go and read. We've got people from MIT and Microsoft and IBM reading that one. I quite enjoy seeing and keeping up with the very latest possibilities in the AI landscape. Like I said, it changes day to day. If I take a week off, as I did last week, to move house, it's possible that I'll miss 3 or 4 major models coming out and then somehow have to catch up. The pace of change is really, really extraordinary. And I think we're going to see this being thrust into the limelight very, very soon, and it will be confronting for people. It will be something that they'll have to take some time to get understanding around, because you have got all the major AI labs and major tech labs working on this. Amazon have been building their own transformer for Alexa. Apple will be coming out with something. Tesla is announcing something on the 30th of September US time, where they'll integrate a transformer into a robot. We've got a lot of different things happening with different labs where they're focusing on bringing in the capabilities of transformer into different implementations. And that's why I'm excited for what Actium AI are doing as well in allowing us to use this technology, these capabilities of transformer in creating new content, but it's also very good at sifting through vast amounts of content. Fantastic. I want to thank Professor Nick here and Dr. David Milhouse for having me at this amazing campus, and I want to thank you for your focus. If you would like to have a read of the books, I'll leave them up here on the lip of the stage. You're welcome to come and flick through them. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to have them one-on-one with you after this. Thank you very much.